Matt Wetzel's story begins in one of the most visually striking yet unforgiving regions of the American Southwest, where Utah, Arizona, and Nevada meet in a vast stretch of red rock, sand, and isolated trails. This is not a place that forgives mistakes. Vehicles sink into soft desert soil without warning, side-by-sides flip on uneven terrain, and tourists regularly underestimate how quickly civilization disappears once they leave paved roads behind. In this environment, Matt built a career not on glamour or convenience, but on necessity. His towing and recovery work centered around rescuing stranded travelers, rental vehicles, and overlanders who found themselves trapped far from help. What made his operation stand out was not just the difficulty of the recoveries, but the willingness to take them on when others would not. Over time, his company became a lifeline for people who misjudged the desert's difficulty. But what began as a local towing service in Hurricane, Utah eventually transformed into something much larger. The turning point came when Matt began filming these recoveries, not as entertainment, but as documentation of real work happening in extreme conditions. That decision quietly set the stage for a global audience to discover what life in off-road rescue actually looked like. Without scripts or staged drama, the raw honesty of his work would eventually turn a small-town operator into an internationally recognized figure. Life before fame in Hurricane, Utah. Before the cameras, before the audience, and before any online recognition, Matt Wetzel was simply a working mechanic and tow operator in Hurricane, Utah. This small desert town sits near Zion National Park, an area where tourism and danger constantly overlap. Visitors arrive expecting scenic views and adventure, but often underestimate the terrain that surrounds them. For Matt, this environment was not a backdrop but a workplace. His company handled the situations that most roadside services would not touch: deep sand recoveries, remote canyon extractions, and vehicles stranded in places where traditional towing equipment simply was not enough. His operation was not large or heavily funded, but it was adaptable. Every job required improvisation, physical endurance, and mechanical creativity. The work was unpredictable, sometimes dangerous, and always dependent on experience rather than instruction manuals. Over time, Matt and his team developed a reputation for showing up when no one else would. This reputation did not come from marketing or branding, but from repetition. Successful recoveries in conditions that others avoided. In this early phase of his career, there was no concept of fame or audience. There was only problem solving in real time, often under pressure, with customers relying on him to turn impossible situations into recoverable ones. The decision that changed everything. The shift from local operator to global figure began with a simple decision: documenting the work. Matt Wetzel did not initially set out to build an entertainment platform. Instead, he began filming recoveries to preserve and share the unique challenges of off-road towing. The early videos were straightforward, focusing on process rather than performance. However, what made them compelling was precisely their lack of artificial structure. There were no scripted moments, no staged conflicts, and no exaggerated drama. Instead, viewers saw real vehicles stuck in real terrain and real solutions being developed under pressure. This authenticity quickly distinguished his content from typical reality-based programming. Audiences responded not because the situations were exaggerated, but because they were believable. As uploads continued, the channel began to grow organically. People were drawn to the unpredictability of each recovery and the calm, analytical way Matt approached problems. What started as a side documentation project gradually evolved into a full-time media presence. Without intending to, Matt had created a new form of content, one rooted in mechanical realism and human problem-solving. This transition marked the beginning of a transformation that would ultimately reshape both his business and his public identity in ways he could not have anticipated. The rise of Matt Off-Road Recovery. As the channel expanded, Matt Off-Road Recovery developed into something far larger than a simple collection of towing videos. The audience grew rapidly, reaching millions of viewers who tuned in not just for entertainment, but for insight into real-world problem-solving. At the center of this growth was Matt's calm and methodical approach to every situation. Whether dealing with a buried RV or a stranded rental vehicle, he maintained a steady composure that contrasted sharply with the urgency of the circumstances. This consistency became part of the channel's identity. Another defining element was the use of custom-built recovery equipment, including his well-known yellow Jeep, often referred to as Brot the Banana. This vehicle became symbolic of the channel's ingenuity and adaptability. Each episode demonstrated not just mechanical skill but creative engineering under pressure, often using unconventional solutions such as buried anchors or multi-vehicle pulls. As viewership increased, so did recognition of the broader team behind the scenes. The channel was no longer just about towing. It had become a showcase of field engineering, teamwork, and community-based problem resolution. This evolution marked the transition from local service provider to influential content creator within the global off-road and recovery community. Community connection and the human element of recovery. One of the most important aspects of Matt Wetzel's work was not the mechanical process itself, but the human interaction behind each recovery. Unlike traditional towing operations that often feel transactional, Matt's approach emphasized communication, reassurance, and empathy. Many of the people he helped were tourists or families who had little experience with off-road terrain and found themselves suddenly stranded in unfamiliar conditions. In these moments, his ability to remain calm and explain the recovery process helped reduce panic and build trust. His videos often captured these interactions, showing conversations filled with humor, reassurance, and shared relief once a vehicle was successfully recovered. This human-centered approach became a defining feature of the channel. Viewers were not only watching machines being pulled from difficult terrain, they were witnessing moments of stress transformed into resolution through cooperation. This emotional layer added depth to the content, making it relatable even to those unfamiliar with off-road driving. Over time, this sense of connection extended beyond the individuals in the videos to the global audience, who began to see Matt not just as a tow operator, but as someone who consistently helped people in vulnerable situations with patience and skill. Expansion into a brand and off-road culture. As the channel's popularity increased, Matt Off-Road Recovery evolved from a media project into a full-scale brand. This expansion included merchandise, live events, and community gatherings that brought fans and enthusiasts together in person. One of the most significant developments was the creation of large-scale off-road events, where recovery techniques, vehicle builds, and community interaction became central attractions. These events allowed viewers to engage directly with the equipment and team they had watched online. The brand also began producing specialized recovery gear, further establishing its presence within the off-road industry. This growth reflected a shift from content creation to cultural influence within a niche but passionate community. However, with expansion came increased visibility and operational complexity. Managing both business and media production required balancing practical towing work with audience expectations and event organization. Despite this, the core philosophy remained unchanged: real work, real recovery, and real problem solving. The brand's growth was not driven by manufactured publicity, but by consistent demonstration of capability in challenging environments. This authenticity remained the foundation of its success, even as its reach expanded far beyond its original scope. The legal accusation that changed public perception. The trajectory of Matt's public image shifted dramatically when legal accusations emerged involving insurance-related claims connected to his towing operations. The case centered on whether certain off-road recovery services had been improperly billed under insurance agreements that were intended for standard roadside assistance. Prosecutors argued that some claims did not align with contractual limitations, leading to allegations of improper billing practices. The charges escalated to a serious legal level, creating widespread attention and concern among viewers and supporters. For many, the news conflicted sharply with the public image of a helpful, community-focused operator. The situation quickly became polarized, with some viewing the case as evidence of wrongdoing and others interpreting it as a misunderstanding of complex service structures in extreme recovery scenarios. The legal process placed significant strain on Matt's business and reputation, forcing him to confront not only financial consequences but also public scrutiny. This moment marked one of the most challenging periods in his career, as the identity he had built through years of work was suddenly questioned in a legal and public forum, a system built for roads, not deserts. At the center of the legal dispute was a structural mismatch between insurance systems and the reality of off-road recovery. Standard roadside assistance programs are designed for predictable environments, highways, urban roads, and simple mechanical failures. Matt's work, however, operated in entirely different conditions. Recoveries often required specialized equipment, multiple vehicles, and hours of labor in remote desert locations. These services did not fit neatly into conventional billing categories. The legal argument focused on whether claims submitted under certain insurance frameworks accurately reflected the nature of the work performed. From Matt's perspective, the issue was not deception but compensation for complex, labor-intensive recovery operations that exceeded standard roadside definitions. From the regulatory perspective, however, the lack of clear categorization created ambiguity. This disconnect between real-world operations and administrative systems became the core of the dispute. It highlighted a broader issue within the industry: how to properly define and reimburse services that exist outside traditional frameworks. The case ultimately reflected not only a legal disagreement, but also a systemic gap between policy design and field reality. The personal betrayal behind the conflict. Beyond the legal proceedings, a more personal layer of the story emerged, involving internal relationships within Matt's circle. According to his account, tensions developed with a close associate who had been part of the business during its growth. This individual allegedly raised concerns and contributed information that intensified scrutiny during the legal investigation. What made this situation particularly impactful was the sense of trust that had previously existed. Business partnerships in small operations often rely heavily on personal relationships, shared risk, and mutual reliance. When those relationships fracture, the consequences extend beyond financial or operational disruption. They affect judgment, stability, and emotional resilience. The alleged conflict introduced an additional layer of strain during an already difficult period, compounding the pressure of legal proceedings. Whether interpreted as disagreement, betrayal, or breakdown in trust, this internal conflict became part of the broader narrative surrounding the case. It illustrated how personal dynamics within small businesses can significantly influence external outcomes, especially when legal and financial pressures are already present. Public reaction and community division. As news of the legal case spread, public reaction was immediate and divided. Supporters of Matt emphasized his long history of helping stranded individuals and highlighted the practical challenges of off-road recovery work. They argued that the situation reflected administrative misunderstandings rather than intentional wrongdoing. Critics, however, viewed the charges as evidence of improper business practices and questioned the ethics of billing structures used in certain recoveries. Social media platforms became spaces of debate, with discussions ranging from technical interpretations of insurance policy to broader questions of accountability. Despite the controversy, a significant portion of the audience maintained trust in Matt's character based on years of consistent content and visible community engagement. This division illustrated the complexity of public perception in cases involving well-known figures, where personal reputation, legal interpretation, and emotional investment intersect. The situation did not produce a uniform conclusion, but instead created a spectrum of opinions shaped by individual interpretation of available information. Rebuilding. After the court case and the weight of public judgment, when the legal storm finally settled, Matt Wetzel found himself in an uncomfortable kind of silence. The headlines had faded, but the consequences lingered in every corner of his life. Probation conditions, financial repayments, and the constant awareness of public opinion created a pressure that didn't disappear just because court proceedings were over. Even simple decisions carried extra weight, as if every action might be interpreted through the lens of the case. For someone whose entire career had been built on trust, transparency, and helping stranded people in impossible situations, that shift was difficult to ignore. Inside Winter Towing, work continued, but it wasn't business as usual. There was a sense of rebuilding not just equipment and recovery rigs, but reputation and morale. Matt leaned heavily on routine, answering calls, heading out on rescues, and focusing on the same desert terrain that had shaped his career from the beginning. The familiar chaos of stuck vehicles and remote recoveries became strangely grounding. Out in the field, there were no headlines, no accusations, just problems that needed solving. The community that refused to walk away. While legal battles and accusations circulated online, something unexpected was happening on the other side of the screen. The audience that had grown around Matt's channel didn't react the way critics assumed they would. Instead of collapsing under controversy, the community became more vocal, more protective, and more invested in the person they felt they already knew through years of content. For many viewers, the connection wasn't built on headlines, it was built on watching real recoveries unfold in real time. They had seen Matt in moments of stress, problem-solving under pressure, and calmly helping strangers out of dangerous situations. That consistency made it difficult for them to reconcile the public narrative with the person they had observed over hundreds of videos. Comment sections became a reflection of that divide. Some questioned, others defended, but a large portion simply waited, watching for actions rather than opinions. As new videos continued to appear, that patience began to pay off. Nothing about the core content changed. Vehicles still got stuck in remote terrain, and recoveries still required ingenuity, teamwork, and patience. That familiarity mattered more than any external narrative. Expansion beyond recovery calls, and the birth of a larger brand. As the channel regained momentum, winter towing evolved from a local recovery service into something far larger than anyone initially planned. What started as documenting difficult rescues had become a full-scale brand with its own identity, events, and ecosystem of products and experiences. The growth wasn't driven by traditional marketing strategies, but by audience engagement and repeated exposure to real-world problem-solving in extreme conditions. One of the defining developments was the introduction of large-scale community events. Fans who had watched recoveries online now had opportunities to experience the culture in person. These gatherings weren't just promotional meetups. They became demonstrations of off-road capability, recovery techniques, and vehicle innovation. People traveled from different regions, sometimes even internationally, to see the team and equipment in action. This expansion also changed the structure of the business. It was no longer just about responding to stranded vehicles. It was about education, demonstration, and community building. New crew members joined, operations scaled, and logistics became more complex. Yet the core philosophy remained consistent. Solve the problem first, everything else second. Even as growth accelerated, there was a deliberate effort not to lose the original identity. The desert recoveries remained central, serving as the foundation everything else was built on. Without that anchor, the expansion would have meant little. With it, the brand maintained authenticity despite its increasing scale. Engineering identity, vehicles that defined a style. Among the most recognizable aspects of Matt Wetzel's work is the collection of specialized recovery and off-road vehicles that have become symbols of the channel's identity. These machines are not just tools. They represent a philosophy of adaptation, improvisation, and mechanical creativity under pressure. Over time, certain builds became iconic within the community, often recognized immediately by viewers before a word was spoken. One of the most famous is the custom-built yellow Jeep, widely known as the Wetzel Mana. It became more than a vehicle, it was a visual shorthand for the channel itself. Designed for versatility in unpredictable terrain, it was repeatedly modified, upgraded, and adapted based on real recovery needs. Every modification reflected lessons learned from previous rescues, making it an evolving piece of engineering rather than a static build. Another standout project was the quote-unquote Morvair, a hybrid creation combining classic automotive design with heavy-duty recovery capability. Built by merging a vintage car body with a robust truck platform, it symbolized the balance between heritage and functionality. It wasn't just about appearance, it was about creating something capable of performing in conditions most vehicles would never survive. These builds reflected a larger truth about the channel's philosophy. Nothing was treated as disposable, and nothing was considered finished. Every machine had potential to evolve based on experience. That mindset extended beyond vehicles into problem solving itself. If a standard solution didn't exist, one would be created on the spot. Resolution, consequences, and moving forward. The legal process eventually concluded with a negotiated resolution that included reduced charges and financial restitution. While the outcome did not result in the most severe potential penalties, it still carried consequences, including probation and repayment obligations. For Matt, the resolution marked the end of a prolonged period of uncertainty, but not the end of its impact. The experience influenced how the business operated moving forward, introducing greater attention to procedural clarity and compliance. At the same time, it reinforced the importance of transparency in both operations and communication with audiences. Despite the legal challenges, the core recovery work continued, and the channel resumed its regular output. The community response played a significant role in this recovery phase, as continued viewership and support helped stabilize both morale and operations. The resolution represented not just an ending to a legal chapter, but a transition into a more cautious and structured phase of growth, rebuilding trust through continued work. Following the legal resolution, Matt Off-Road Recovery focused on rebuilding momentum through consistent work and continued transparency. New recovery videos returned to the platform, maintaining the same emphasis on real-world problem-solving and mechanical creativity. Over time, the audience response demonstrated sustained loyalty, with viewers continuing to engage with the content despite previous controversy. This period emphasized the resilience of community-driven platforms, built on authenticity rather than purely commercial branding. The team also invested in improved equipment and expanded capabilities, allowing for more efficient and complex recoveries. Rather than avoiding the past, the channel integrated its experiences into a broader narrative of persistence and adaptation. This approach helped reinforce trust and stability within the audience base. The continuation of operations signaled that while challenges had occurred, they had not fundamentally altered the mission of the work being performed. The Morvair and mechanical reinvention. One of the most distinctive projects to emerge from this period was the Morvair, a hybrid recovery vehicle combining elements of classic automotive design with heavy-duty off-road functionality. This build symbolized the philosophy at the heart of Matt's work, taking existing structures and transforming them into something more capable and purposeful. The Morvair represented both engineering creativity and symbolic resilience. It demonstrated how older components could be repurposed into modern solutions, reflecting the same principles used in recovery operations themselves. The project attracted significant attention within the community, serving as both a functional tool and a visual representation of innovation under constraint. Its development also highlighted the collaborative nature of the team, showcasing how collective problem-solving contributed to complex builds. The Morvair became more than just a vehicle. It became a representation of adaptation, creativity, and forward movement after adversity. Legacy of a recovery operator in the modern era. Matt Wetzel's story ultimately reflects a broader narrative about modern digital influence, real-world labor, and the intersection between authenticity and public perception. What began as a local towing operation evolved into a globally recognized platform for showcasing problem-solving in extreme environments. Along the way, it encountered success, controversy, and personal challenges that reshaped both its operations and its public identity. Despite legal and interpersonal conflicts, the core of the work remained consistent, helping people in difficult situations through mechanical expertise and calm decision-making. The legacy of the channel is not defined by a single event, but by years of consistent action in environments where failure is not an option. It also highlights the complexities of operating within systems that are not always designed for real-world extremes. In the end, the story is not simply about towing vehicles from the desert, but about navigating the unpredictable terrain of success, scrutiny, and resilience in the digital age. Closing reflection on strength, trust, and continuity. The story of Matt Wetzel and Matt Off-Road Recovery is ultimately one of endurance under pressure, shaped by both external challenges and internal conflict. It demonstrates how quickly public perception can shift, and how deeply personal and professional worlds can become intertwined in the age of online visibility. Despite facing legal scrutiny, personal betrayal, and public division, the foundation of the work, helping stranded individuals in extreme environments, remained intact. The continued support of a global audience played a significant role in stabilizing the aftermath, allowing the operation to continue evolving rather than collapsing under pressure. What stands out most is not the controversy itself, but the ability to persist through it while maintaining a recognizable core identity. In a landscape where reputation can be fragile and narratives shift quickly, the story serves as a reminder that real-world consistency often carries more weight than any single moment of disruption.